step into a mystery that turned a glittering gala into a deadly game. In 2025, a billionaire's murder shook New Orleans. A locked room, a cryptic note, and a web of lies so tangled it'd rattle even Hercule Poirot's moustache and make Sherlock Holmes pause mid-pipe. But one man saw through it all, Benoit Blanc, the southern sleuth with a mind sharper than a switchblade. They say he found a clue so brilliant it outfoxed the greatest detectives in history. Betrayal, greed, or something colder? Join us as we unravel a case that'll keep you glued till the final twist. Subscribe now, and let's chase the truth together. Chapter 1. Story. Murder at the Manor's heart. It's 2025 New Orleans, and Varnell Manor glows under the stars. A sprawling estate dripping with tech money and old-world charm. Tonight, it's alive with a gala. Crystal chandeliers sparkle, champagne bubbles in every glass, and Cyrus Varnell, a billionaire who built an AI empire, stands at the center, laughing with the elite. Politicians, tech moguls, his own family. They're all here, smiling for the cameras. But behind those smiles, secrets sharp enough to kill. By midnight, the music stops cold. Cyrus Varnell is dead. They find him in his private study, a locked room no one could have breached. He's slumped at his mahogany desk, stabbed clean through the heart. Blood pools under a crumpled note in his hand. Trust the shadow. No knife anywhere. The study's door was bolted from the inside, windows sealed, and the security cameras mysteriously offline for 10 minutes during the gala. The police shrug it off as suicide, a rich man's breakdown. But suicides don't write cryptic warnings, do they? This was murder, and it smelled like a scandal bigger than anything Hercule Poirot unravelled on a train, or Sherlock Holmes chased through London's fog. The cops were ready to close the case, but Cyrus's daughter, Elise, wasn't buying it. She called in a name whispered in elite circles, Benoit Blanc. Picture him stepping out of a vintage car, bow tie crisp, eyes like a hawk under a mop of silver hair. "This ain't no suicide, darling," he drawls, tipping his hat. "This is a masterpiece of deceit." Blanc's no ordinary detective. He's got Poirot's knack for reading souls and Holmes's nose for the tiniest clue. He saw a puzzle that'd make the great sweat, and he was ready to play. Blanc started with the players, each one a suspect with a shadow to hide. Elise Varnell, 32, the fierce heir who clashed with Cyrus over his shady tech deals. She wanted control of Varnell Tech. Bad. Julian Varnell, 28, Cyrus's son, a playboy with a silver tongue and empty pockets, cut off from the family fortune. Dr. Lena Korsakov, 45, the Russian AI genius behind Cyrus's empire. Rumors swirled she was, selling secrets to rivals. Miles Trent, 50, a rival CEO who lost a $1 billion deal to Cyrus and never forgave him. And Clara Voss, 60, the loyal housekeeper who'd seen every corner of the manor. Her eyes flickered when asked about the gala night. Blanc prowled the study like a cat, his boots soft on the Persian rug. He studied the note, "Trust the shadow," written in fresh ink, not a day old. A faint scratch on the lock caught his eye. No forced entry, but someone knew their way around. A shattered wine glass lay in the corner, ignored by the cops. Poirot would have charmed a confession by now, sipping tea with suspects. Holmes would have measured the room to the inch. Blanc? He just grinned, muttering, "Somebody's playing a game, and I'm fixin' to win." Then came the first crack in the case. Under a loose floorboard, Blanc found a hidden ledger. Pages scrawled with numbers, millions funneled to something called Project Shadow. A secret deal? A corporate betrayal? Or the reason Cyrus died? The gala's glitter hid a web of lies, family greed, stolen tech, maybe even treason. Blanc tucked the ledger away, his mind racing. This wasn't just a murder. It was the start of something darker, something that'd test even Poirot's little grey cells or Holmes's cold logic. But the manor wasn't done spilling blood. Another death was coming, and with it a clue that had turned the puzzle upside down. One thing was clear. Benoit Blanc was only getting started. Chapter 2. Story: Lies Among the Elite. Suspenseful music fades in, moody strings with a pulsing beat, like Knives Out meets Succession. Narrate with a cinematic tone, blending tension and Blanc's sly wit, letting the drama unfold naturally. The air in Varnell Manor hung heavy after Cyrus Varnell's murder. The gala's glitter was gone, replaced by whispers and sideways glances. Benoit Blanc stood in the grand foyer, his eyes scanning the chandeliers as if they held answers. Cyrus was dead, stabbed in a locked study, a note saying, "Trust the shadow left behind." That ledger Blanc found, with millions tied to Project Shadow, screamed trouble. Corporate games, maybe treason. But Blanc wasn't chasing paper trails yet. He was chasing people. Every soul in that manor had a reason to want Cyrus gone, and lies were piling up faster than Mardi Gras beads. Blanc started with the family, where betrayal cuts deepest. Elise Varnell, Cyrus's daughter, paced the library like a caged panther. She was 32, sharp as a tack, and hungry to steer Varnell Tech toward cleaner deals. But she'd fought with Cyrus the night of the gala. Voices raised over ethics, overheard by half the staff. "He was ruining everything," she snapped when Blanc pressed her, her eyes cold but her hands trembling. Was it grief or guilt? Blanc noticed her necklace, a rare jade pendant, oddly mismatched with her gown. Poirot would have called that a tell. Holmes would have sketched it in his notebook. Blanc just filed it away, his drawl soft as he said, "Grief's a funny thing, Miss Elise. Hides more than it shows." Next was Julian Varnell, the prodigal son, slouched in the billiard room with a whiskey in hand. At 28, he was all charm and no cash, cut off from Cyrus's fortune for his gambling debts. Blanc caught him slipping a pawn ticket into his pocket. A forged Rolex, sold hours before the murder. "I was at the bar all night," Julian smirked, but his eyes darted to the study's door down the hall. Blanc leaned in, voice low. "A man with debts like yours, Julian, might sell more than a watch." The kid flinched. A motive was taking shape. Money makes killers out of sons. Then came Dr. Lena Korsakoff, the brains behind Varnell Tech's AI empire. She met Blanc in the Manor's tech lab. Her Russian accent clipped as she dodged his questions. At 45, Lena was a legend, until rumours spread she'd leaked code to Chinese rivals. Blanc spotted her phone, buzzing with a coded message during their talk. "Cyrus trusted me," she insisted, but her fingers tightened on a USB drive she quickly pocketed. Blanc's smile didn't waver. "Trust is a slippery thing, Doctor," he said. "Slips right through locked doors. If Poirot read minds through chatter, Lena's secrets were screaming without a word. Miles Trent was tougher to crack." The rival CEO lounged in the smoking room, 50 years old with a grin like a shark. Cyrus had crushed Miles's company in a deal last year, costing him billions. "I don't stab backs," Miles laughed, puffing a cigar. But Blanc noticed his boots, caked with mud from the manor's gardens, where no guest should have wandered. Holmes would have measured the mud's depth. Blanc just noted it, saying, "Gardens are lovely at night, Mr. Trent. Perfect for burying grudges." Miles's laugh faltered, just for a second. Last was Clara Voss, the housekeeper who'd served the Varnells for decades. At 60, she hovered in the kitchen, her hands wringing a dishcloth. She'd overheard Cyrus on a call before the gala, muttering about shadows closing in. When Blanc asked who he meant, Clara froze. "I saw someone," she whispered, "a figure slipping through the crowd, not a guest." Her voice cracked, fear swallowing her words. Blanc leaned close, gentle but firm. "Shadows don't move on their own, Miss Clara. Who was it?" She shook her head, tears welling. Something or someone had her scared silent. Blanc stepped onto the manor's balcony. The New Orleans, skyline glinting in the distance. Elise's pendant, Julian's pawn ticket, Lena's coded message, Miles's muddy boots, Clara's fear. Each was a thread in a tapestry of deceit. Poirot would have sat them all down, teasing lies with a twirl of his moustache. Holmes would have paced Baker Street, piecing clues like a chessboard. Blanc? He lit a cigarette, exhaling slow. "This ain't one killer," he murmured to himself. "This is a conspiracy." But the manor had more to say. As Blanc turned back inside, a scream echoed from the greenhouse. Clara Voss was dead, poisoned, her body cold beside a shattered vial. Another note lay crumpled in her hand. "The shadow sees all." The game wasn't over. It was just getting deadlier. Chapter 3. Story. A Deadly Second Blow. Varnell Manor was no longer a palace. It was a tomb. Cyrus Varnell's murder had cracked open a nest of lies. A stabbed billionaire, a locked study, a note whispering, "Trust the shadow." Benoit Blanc had stirred the pot, sniffing out secrets among the elite. Elise's trembling hands, Julian's pawned watch, Lena's coded messages, Miles's muddy boots, and Clara's terrified hint of a shadowy figure. That ledger, stuffed with millions for Project Shadow, hinted at a scandal bigger than greed. But Blanc's questions were pulling strings someone wanted cut. And in a place like this, loose strings get tied with blood. It was dawn when the scream shattered the silence. Blanc rushed to the manor's greenhouse, its glass walls fogged with morning dew. There, sprawled among exotic ferns, was Clara Voss, the housekeeper who'd seen too much. Her face was frozen in a gasp, her fingers clutching a broken vial. A note lay beside her, scrawled in the same hand as Cyrus's. "The shadow sees all." Poison, Blanc knew instantly. Not just any poison, a rare venom, distilled from plants right here in the greenhouse. Clara hadn't just died. She'd been silenced. Blanc knelt by her body, his jaw tight. "You tried to warn us, didn't you, Clara?" he murmured. The police swarmed in, but Blanc waved them off. This wasn't random. Clara had whispered about a figure at the gala, someone who didn't belong. Now she was gone, and the killer was laughing. Poirot would have called it a pattern, like his ABC murders. Holmes would have traced the venom's source by now. Blanc? He saw a chess game, and the board was rigged. He sent for the coroner's report, his mind already spinning. The venom hit Clara hours ago, during the gala, not after. Someone had slipped it into her drink, maybe her tray of champagne flutes. Blanc pictured her weaving through the crowd, serving guests, her eyes catching that shadow. He retraced her steps in his head, like Holmes mapping a crime in his mind palace. One flute was missing from the tray he'd seen in the kitchen. Cleaned, and replaced, no doubt, to hide the poison. Clever, Blanc muttered, but not clever enough. Back in the manor, the suspects were unravelling. Elise locked herself in her room, claiming shock, but Blanc caught her slipping a burner phone under her pillow. Julian was nowhere to be found. His car gone from the garage. Lena hovered in the tech lab, her hands shaking as she deleted files from a laptop. Miles, bold as ever, demanded Blanc focus on real threats, his cigar smoke curling like a threat of its own. Each move screamed guilt or fear. Blanc didn't trust any of them, not yet. He called the remaining 4 to the dining hall, his voice calm but cutting. Clara Voss died because she saw something, he said, pacing like Poirot before a parlour reveal. A shadow, she called it. One of you knows who that is. Elise's eyes flicked to the floor. Lena's lips tightened. Miles snorted, but his hand gripped his glass too hard. Julian, just slinking back in, reeked of bourbon and panic. Blanc let the silence stretch, watching their faces like a hawk. The thing about shadows, he drawled, is they need light to exist, and I'm about to shine a big old spotlight. Blanc turned to the gala's guest list, cross-checking names with Clara's last hours. One entry stood out. A late addition, Mr. Gray. No first name, no address. Nobody recalled seeing him, yet Clara's tray had served his table. Blanc's gut churned. Was Gray the shadow, or a ghost meant to distract? He dug deeper, finding a caterer's log. Gray had requested a specific flute, one that never made it back to the kitchen. Holmes would have loved that detail. Poirot would have smiled at the audacity. Blanc just nodded, his plan forming. Then came a new lead. A groundskeeper, rattled by Clara's death, slipped Blanc a tip. He'd seen someone in the greenhouse the night of the gala. Not a guest, but someone in a staff jacket, tampering with the venomous plants. The jacket was gone now, ditched in a dumpster behind the manor. Blanc checked it. Inside was a monogrammed cufflink, engraved with M.T. Miles Trent, or another misdirection. The devil's in the details, Blanc said to himself, pocketing the cufflink. The manor was closing in, its walls whispering betrayal. Clara's death wasn't the end, it was a warning. Blanc stood in the greenhouse, staring at the shattered vial. 2 murders, 2 notes, 1 shadow. He was close, but the killer was closer. Something bigger was brewing. A secret that'd make Poirot rethink his theories and Holmes burn his violin. And it was about to explode. Chapter 4. Story. Secrets of a Hidden Empire. Varnell Manor had become a pressure cooker, its walls closing in on secrets too heavy to hold. Cyrus Varnell's murder, stabbed in a locked study, clutching Trust the Shadow, had peeled back the first layer of lies. Clara Voss's death in the greenhouse, poisoned with a vial and a note screaming "The Shadow sees all," proved this wasn't one killer's game. It was a syndicate. Benoit Blanc stood at the heart of it, holding a ledger tied to Project Shadow and a cufflink marked MT, Miles Trent, or a clever fake. Suspects Elise, Julian, Lena, Miles were cracking. But the truth was buried deeper, in a web of greed and power that'd make Poirot's parlour talks seem quaint and Holmes's opium haze look tame. Blanc took the fight to the Manor's nerve centre, Cyrus's private server room, a fortress of blinking lights and encrypted drives. He wasn't a tech wizard, but he had a contact, a hacker named Quinn, who owed him a favour from a bourbon-soaked case years back. "Break this open," Blanc said, sliding the ledger's numbers across a diner table outside town. Quinn's laptop hummed, and by dawn they had a hit. Project Shadow wasn't just a deal. It was a weapon, an AI system coded to hijack global markets, sold to a rogue buyer for billions. Cyrus had been ready to blow the whistle, risking his empire. Someone, maybe everyone, wanted him quiet. Back at the manor, Blanc played his cards close. He watched Elise, the daughter who'd hired him. She was pacing the conservatory, her jade pendant catching the light. He'd seen her burn a phone, caught her whispering about cleaning the mess. Was she grieving or scheming? "Your daddy was going to burn it all down, wasn't he?" Blanc asked, voice soft as silk. Elise froze, her eyes darting. "He was a fool," she hissed, then caught herself. Too late. Blanc smelled blood. Poirot would have nodded at her slip. Holmes would have catalogued it. He just tipped his hat, filing it away. Julian, the wastrel son, was back, reeking of trouble. Blanc cornered him in the garage, where Julian was wiping down his car like it held state secrets. That pawn ticket from Chapter 2 wasn't just a watch. It traced to a dealer tied to a cartel, the same one bankrolling Shadow's buyer. "You sold more than trinkets, didn't you, boy?" Blanc growled. Julian's smirk vanished. "I didn't touch him," he stammered, but his hands shook like a leaf in a storm. A desperate son, drowning in debt, Holmes would have traced. The cartel in a day. Blanc was already there. Lena Korsakov was next, holed up in her lab like a spider. Blanc found her shredding papers, a bead of sweat on her brow. That coded message on her phone. Quinn had cracked it. A deal to sell Shadow's blueprints to a rival nation, dated the day Cyrus died. "Cyrus trusted you," Blanc said, leaning on her desk. "Why betray him?" Lena's laugh was bitter. "Trust? He was going to expose us all. Her USB drive was gone now, swapped for a decoy Blanc planted. Poirot's psychology would have broken her. Blanc's trap was tighter." Miles Trent strutted through the manor like he owned it. But Blanc wasn't fooled. Those muddy boots and the MT. Cufflink pointed to the greenhouse, where Clara died. Blanc tailed him to the manor's archives, catching Miles rifling through Cyrus's contracts. "Looking for something to burn, Mr. Trent?" Blanc asked, stepping from the shadows. Miles spun, his cigar dropping ash. "You're fishing, detective," he sneered. but his eyes betrayed panic. Holmes would have matched the ash to a brand. Blanc noted the sweat on Miles's collar. The cufflink nagged at Blanc. He tested it under a loupe in the study. Cheap metal, not Miles's style. A plant? Someone framing the loudest suspect. Blanc dug into Mr. Gray, the gala's ghost guest from Chapter 3. A maid, spooked by Clara's death, admitted seeing Gray near the study. Tall, hooded, gone like smoke. Blanc cross-checked gala footage Quinn pulled. Gray's face was blurred, but his sleeve flashed that same jade as Elise's pendant. A coincidence? Or a thread tying the Varnells to the shadow? Then a bombshell. Quinn sent Blanc a file. Project Shadow's buyer wasn't just a rogue state. It was a syndicate with ties to every suspect. Elise's burner phone pinged their network. Julian's cartel debts led to their accounts. Lena's blueprints fed their tech. Miles's lost deal was their sabotage. They weren't just suspects. They were pieces in a machine, and Cyrus's whistleblowing threatened to smash it. Blanc sat in the manor's attic, ledger open, cufflink glinting. "This ain't a murder," he whispered. "It's a coup." But the killer wasn't done. As Blanc pieced it together, a fire alarm screamed. The archives were ablaze, contracts, clues, gone. Someone was burning the truth. Poirot would have wept for the lost motives. Holmes would have salvaged a charred page. Blanc? He ran toward the smoke, knowing the next move was his, or the Shadow's. Chapter 5. Story. Blanc's masterful Trapvarnel Manor was a house on fire, literally and figuratively. Cyrus Varnell's murder, sealed in a locked study with a note hissing "Trust the Shadow," had unravelled into a conspiracy. Clara, Voss's poisoning in the greenhouse, marked by "The Shadow Sees All," confirmed a killer, or killers, playing for keeps. Blanc's discovery of Project Shadow, an AI weapon deal tied to a syndicate, linked every suspect. Elise's burner, phone, Julian's cartel debts, Lena's stolen blueprints, Miles's sabotage. The MT cufflink seemed to pin Miles, but its cheap metal screamed setup. Then the archives burned, swallowing clues in flames. Someone was erasing the truth. But Benoit Blanc wasn't just chasing shadows. He was casting them. Blanc stood in the charred remains of the archives, ash smudging his bow tie. The fire wasn't an accident. It was a desperate move. He'd seen enough killers to know panic when it smoked. Poirot would have gathered suspects for a theatrical unmasking by now, twirling his moustache. Holmes would have rebuilt the crime from a single ember. Blanc had his own plan, a trap to make the Shadow flinch. "Time to stir the gumbo," he muttered, his eyes glinting like a fox in a henhouse. He started with a gamble. Misinformation. Blanc let slip to a jittery maid, knowing she'd gossip, that he'd salvaged a disc from the archives, loaded with Shadow's buyer list. It was a lie, but a juicy one. He watched the manor buzz, suspects twitching like roaches under a light. Elise doubled her security, her jade pendant flashing as she barked orders over her burner phone. Julian vanished again, leaving a half-packed suitcase in his room. Lena locked her lab, but Blanc's hacker friend Quinn caught her emailing a coded panic note. "Disk is live. Move now." Miles, cool as ever, offered Blanc a cigar and a deal. Name your price to walk away. Blanc smiled. Some things ain't for sale, friend. The trap needed bait, so Blanc staged a gala reenactment. He gathered the suspects in the ballroom, chandeliers dim to mimic that fatal night. "We're gonna walk through Cyrus's last hours," he announced, his drawl slicing the tension. "One of you knows why he died." He handed out props, fake flutes, guest lists, watching their hands. Elise gripped hers too tight, her knuckles white. Julian fumbled his, sweat beading. Lena's eyes darted to the exit. Miles laughed, but his cigar trembled. Blanc paced, reenacting Cyrus's path to the study, pausing at the corridor where Clara saw Mr. Gray. Then he dropped his first bomb. "Clara served a flute to Gray," Blanc said, holding up a replica. "But it never came back to the kitchen. Why? Because it carried venom, same as killed her." Gasps rippled. He pointed to a screen, Quinn's hack projecting gala footage. A blurred figure, Gray, slipped near the study, jade glinting on his wrist. Elise touched her pendant, her face paling. Blanc didn't blink. "Shadows leave traces," he said, "and I'm collecting 'em." The reenactment turned hotter. Blanc revealed the cufflink's truth. MT ain't Miles Trent. It's a plant meant to throw us off. Miles smirked, but Blanc wasn't done. He tossed out a new clue. A burner phone log Quinn traced, showing calls from Elise to the syndicate the night Cyrus died. "You were planning something, Miss Varnell," he pressed. Elise snapped, "You're grasping!" But her voice cracked. Julian lunged forward, yelling, "She's no killer!" Too quick, too scared. Lena stayed silent, her fingers twitching. Miles clapped slowly, mocking, but his boots shifted toward the door. Blanc tightened the screws. He staged a fake disc handover, telling the maid he'd meet Quinn at the manor's gate at midnight. He hid in the study instead, lights off, watching through a crack. Footsteps crept past. Lena, clutching a knife, heading for the gate. She wasn't alone. Julian followed, whispering, "It's not worth it!" Blanc tailed them, silent as Holmes stalking Moriarty. At the gate, Lena froze. Quinn wasn't there. Blanc stepped out, voice low, "Looking for a disc that don't exist, Doctor." Lena dropped the knife, her cool shattered, but the trap caught more than Lena. A car roared up, Miles at the wheel, Elise in the passenger seat. They'd come for the disc too, or to silence whoever chased it. Julian bolted, yelling, "I told you it's over!" Blanc stood his ground, unflinched. "You'll move like a pack," he said, "but packs turn on each other." Elise's eyes burned, her pendant catching moonlight. Was she the shadow, or its pawn? The night exploded. A shot rang out, not from Miles or Elise, but from the manor's roof. A sniper, aiming for Blanc. He dove, glass shattering around him. Lena screamed, Julian vanished into the dark, and Miles floored the gas, tires screeching. Blanc rolled to cover, heart pounding but mind clear. The disc lie had worked, too well. The shadow wasn't just in the manor. It was watching, armed and desperate. Blanc crawled to the greenhouse, catching his breath. Poirot would have cursed the chaos. Holmes would have measured the bullet's angle. Blanc? He laughed, low and grim. "Ain't no puzzle too messy for me," he whispered, dusting ash from his coat. The trap had sprung, but the real clue was still out there, one that'd break the shadow's spine. Chapter 6. Story. The Clue That Fooled. All Varnell Manor was a battlefield now, scarred by blood and betrayal. Cyrus Varnell's murder, stabbed in a locked study, whispering, "Trust the shadow," had spiraled into a conspiracy. Clara, Voss's poisoning marked by "The Shadow Sees All," exposed a syndicate behind Project Shadow, an AI weapon deal tying every suspect. Elise's calls, Julian's debts, Lena's blueprints, Miles's grudges. The MT cufflink was a fake, the archives burned to ash, and a sniper's bullet had just missed Blanc in a trap gone wild. Benoit Blanc wasn't shaken. He was ignited. The shadow thought it had won. It was wrong. Blanc gathered the suspects. In the manor's ballroom, chandeliers casting long, jagged shadows. Elise stood rigid, her jade pendant glinting. Julian slouched, eyes bloodshot. Lena clutched her bag, knuckles white. Miles leaned against a pillar, smirking like he'd already dodged the noose. Blanc paced, slow and deliberate, his drawl cutting the silence. "You thought you could outrun the truth," he said. "But truth's like a hound. It always catches up." He started with the sniper. "That shot wasn't random," Blanc said, tossing a spent bullet casing onto the table. "It was military grade, traced to a syndicate gunman, but hired by someone close. Blanc's trap with the fake disc had flushed them out, and Quinn's hack caught a payment trail." He locked eyes with Lena. "Your coded email, Doctor. Sent an hour before the shot. Care to explain?" Lena's face crumpled. "I was protecting my work," she stammered. "Not killing." Half true, Blanc knew. Lena sold secrets, not bullets. Poirot would have pried her motive open. Holmes would have mapped her lies. Blanc moved on. The MT cufflink. A distraction planted in the greenhouse to frame Miles. But Blanc held up a new find. A second cufflink, jade-studded, snagged from the study's rug. "Matches your pendant, Miss Elise," he said, voice like velvet over steel. Elise laughed shrill. "You're desperate." Blanc didn't flinch. Mr. Grey wore jade too. Funny how he vanished, right when you made those syndicate calls. Julian jumped up. "Leave her alone." But Blanc saw it. Julian's panic wasn't love. It was fear. Then the genius clue. Blanc revealed a gala photo, buried in Quinn's recovered files. It showed Elise handing Cyrus a flute. Not champagne, but laced with a sedative. "You slowed him down," Blanc said. "Got him to the study, where your partner stabbed him." The partner? Not Miles, not Lena, not Julian. Blanc turned to the pillar. "Step out, Mr. Trent. Or should I say, Mr. Grey." Miles's smirk froze. The room gasped. Blanc laid it bare. Miles posed as Grey, used Elise's access to slip in, stabbed Cyrus with a retractable blade, explaining the missing weapon. Elise framed Lena with blueprints, Julian with debts, to tie up loose ends. Why? Project Shadow. Cyrus's whistleblowing would have tanked Miles's comeback and Elise's inheritance. Together, they built a shadow to bury him. Clara died when she saw Miles as Grey, poisoned by Elise's stolen venom. The notes? Elise's flourish, masking greed as mystery. Blanc held up the photo, jade glinting. "You fooled the world, Miss Varnell, but not me." Elise lunged, screaming, "You've got nothing!" Miles bolted for the door. Blanc didn't chase. He'd already tipped the cops. Sirens wailed outside. "Checkmate," Blanc whispered, lighting a cigarette. Poirot would have toasted the reveal. Holmes would have nodded in silence. Blanc, he just watched the shadows fall. Chapter 7. Story. Blanc's Victory. Lapvarnell Manor stood quiet at last, its shadows chased away by truth. Cyrus Varnell's murder, stabbed in a locked study, clutching Trust the Shadow. And Clara Voss's poisoning, marked by the due de Shadow Sees All, had unravelled a syndicate's greed. Elise Varnell and Miles Trent, unmasked as the killers, were cuffed and gone, their jade clues and gala tricks no match for Benoit Blanc. Project Shadow, their AI weapon scheme, was dead, in the water, exposed to the world. The manor's air felt lighter, but Blanc wasn't one for goodbyes. He stood on the balcony, New Orleans twinkling below, a cigarette glowing in his hand. "Every case leaves a mark," he drawled, exhaling slow. "This one left a scar. Elise had drugged her father. Miles stabbed him, all to save their empire. Clara died for seeing too much. Her poison, their final lie." Poirot would have toasted their downfall with a flourish, charming the room. Holmes would have filed it away, cold and precise on Baker Street. Blanc? He just grinned, the kind of grin that said he'd outplayed the devil himself. He flicked the cigarette away, its ember fading into the night. The world would talk about this case, how Blanc's genius clue, a photo and a cufflink, broke a conspiracy wide open. Better than Poirot's parlour games? Smarter than Holmes's logic? That's for the history books. For now, Blanc tipped his hat to the manor, whispering, "Y'all keep your secrets better next time." Another puzzle waited out there, and he'd be ready.